Perks of Being a Widow podcast. Spoiler, there are none. My name is Avalon, and today I'm going to be sharing my story with you. And you know, it's funny. So I tried to record this months ago, and I couldn't stop crying. I didn't make it all the way through, so I stopped. And then I started doing these interviews. So I have about 10 interviews done. And I really thought I could get away with not sharing my own story first. I realized that if I'm going to do this and if I'm going to do it right, then I need to be open and I need to be honest and I need to actually share my story first. So that's what we're going to do here today is I'm going to tell you my story. So I met Derek September 2nd of 2015. It was the first day of rehearsal for a play that we were in. And, you know, we had kind of done the general, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Oh, I'm playing this character. I'm playing this character. You know, that sort of thing. And then there was a piano in the rehearsal space, and I sat down and I started playing chords. And then Derek started improvising a song over it, and it was like something really stupid. It was like needing to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or something like that. But that's how we met, was making up a song together. I should mention that I have never wanted to get married. Like growing up, I never wanted to get married. My parents were divorced, and I, had a very skewed view of what love and marriage were. I didn't think it was something that I was ever going to want. I dated, through college and into my 20s, and I thought about it. I was like, well, maybe, and then I was like, no, like it's just not for me. I figured I would live alone and I would have cats and I would take lovers as I so chose, and I was like good with that. I was like, that's my future, that's what I want, that's what we're here for. And then of course I met Derek making up a stupid song together. We're in this play together. He avoided me through most of the rehearsal process because apparently I'm scary, apparently I'm intimidating. It was the final rehearsal. It was like the dress rehearsal. And so we were getting ready to open the show, and he, asked me out, and I was like, all right, like we can see where this goes. By the time the show closed, we were engaged. We kind of skipped the whole like dating part. Like I think we went out on our actual first official date like after we were already engaged. Cuz when you know. I remember calling, like being on the phone with my parents and telling them, I'm engaged. And they were like, to who? And I was like, well, to my fiance, clearly. I think everyone was so surprised that I was engaged, but I don't think anybody was more surprised than me. Because I was like, because I didn't think it was anything I would ever want. And then there was Derek. We were engaged for about a year. We decided, we had a whole conversation about it where I was like, we need to slow down like a little bit. Like we're engaged, I'm all in, but like we need to like be sure. So we waited a year to actually get married, and it was a very uh it was a good year. I mean, there were definitely challenges. He had a mental illness. He didn't have an official diagnosis, but definitely bipolar, possibly borderline personality. That made some parts of our relationship very challenging and very difficult. He attempted suicide while we were together. It was Valentine's. We almost eloped to Vegas on Valentine's Day, mostly so that he could get on my insurance because I was working for JP Morgan Chase at the time. I had pretty decent benefits, and so we thought about getting married, so that he could get on those benefits right away so that he could get the help that he needed, for his mental health. And we decided not to do that. We decided to stick to our original plan. And he was able to start getting treatment. Like he had a therapist who he was going to really regularly. They were working on getting him on some medications to help regulate his mood and his brain chemistry and all of that. During this time, so I started having panic attacks at work. partially because it wasn't a very good fit for me, the job itself, and partially because I was worried about his mental health. You know, there were I wasn't sure what I would be coming home to, you know, what mood he was going to be in. I went on short-term disability and started to, like, saw a therapist for a little bit, and I came to the conclusion that this was not the job for me, that, you know, even, you know, without what was going on with Derek, it was not a good fit for me, and I wasn't happy, and I didn't want to be doing it, and it was not a good environment for me. So I quit that job. And so then we were both a little on the underemployed side. His acting career was really starting to take off, and that was really awesome. It did cause a little tension in our relationship, partially most, and like, this was me, like, I you know, I've wanted to be an actor since I was 6. You know, it's been something I have always wanted, and I was so happy for him, but I was jealous. I was, you know, like, I was seeing his career really take off, and it was beautiful, and I couldn't get in the door. I couldn't even get the audition to try to be in the things, you know? And so, like, that was challenging. Yeah, so we had our ups and downs, we had our challenges. We also had a lot of fun. We're both actors, and we were working on a couple of different projects together. Like, we were going into rehearsal for a play that we were producing together, so we were going to act and produce in it, and a friend of his was going to direct. We had started working on, like, a radio, like a spoof radio show. So it was like a spoof of NPR. It was called WBS. Yeah, so we had our ups and downs. It was a very tumultuous relationship. I personally believe that if he had lived, we probably would have divorced and remarried each other, because, like, we loved each other so much, and, like, and there were so many great things about our relationship, but, like, the challenges were not small. You know, the things that were difficult were not, it was not easy. Our relationship was not easy. Our wedding was the least planned ever. We basically showed up at a park, and my brother officiated. I was late to our wedding because my bridesmaids were in a different Uber, and the Uber got lost. So that was fun. So he was like texting me being like, "Hey, you coming? You on your way?" And I was like, "Yep, I'm on my way." His vows were, he pulled out a receipt from his pocket and said, "My friend Junior wrote this note." And I think this was based in reality. I think this actually happened. It wasn't the actual note, but he said, "Dear Avalon, you seem like a really nice lady. I drank the beers in the fridge. I hope they weren't yours." And that was his vows, because he was goofy like that. And then my vows were a little ukulele a little ukulele theme that we had kind of written together, because I didn't think we needed to say words to each other. Our relationship was something beyond words. So those were my vows. We went to his He worked at a bar, and so we went to this bar afterwards, and partied. Like, basically our wedding was one big party. And that's, like, that fit. That was us. Our marriage was very brief. We went to the Bahamas for our honeymoon. We went on a cruise to the Bahamas, which was also so fucking awesome. Like, we had a great time. I'm not, like, cruises, not really my thing, you know, but with him, like, everything with him was just fun, you know. He was just a fun guy, and he was so funny. Could always make me laugh. He started getting sick. Actually, the first night that he showed any symptoms was actually when we were on our honeymoon. It was like the first night of our honeymoon, and we were in Miami getting ready to leave for this cruise, and, you know, he started having, like, chills and sweats, and he couldn't stop shaking, and you know, so that was the first time he showed symptoms. And so that would have been mid-November, and he's just kind of started getting worse and worse and worse. He was losing weight. He had quit smoking. And because of that, he was also drinking less. So he quit smoking, he wasn't drinking, and a lot of his symptoms, we thought at first that he was just going through withdrawal because he was a pretty heavy smoker and drinker. So we just thought he was going through withdrawal, and then it just kept happening and he kept getting worse. And so by the time we got to Christmas, so we also, in this time, we applied for new health insurance because he had been on the state health insurance. But, since we got married and like all this, like we qualified for better health insurance. So he really wanted to wait until our good insurance kicked in before going to the hospital. And so it was Christmas Day, and we were visiting his parents down in central Illinois. And he, had spent the day with the like the chills and sweats, and chest pain. So we finally convinced him to go to the ER. They ran some tests. The doctor wanted to transfer him to a hospital in Peoria right away so that they could get him into surgery. And Derek refused because he wanted to go back to Chicago and go to a doctor there. When we were in the hospital, not on Christmas Day, he took a picture of us, like with him, like in the hospital bed in his gown, and I'm just making a face, like, "Come on, baby," and he posted it on Facebook, and he was like, "I want likes," and I was like, "Baby, that's not what's gonna happen. What's gonna happen is everybody's gonna start calling me, and I'm gonna have to deal with this, and like, could you not?" And he was like, "But I want likes." So like he posted this picture, and exactly what I said was going to happen happened, and everybody started calling me and talking and like texting me, and I was like, "Okay, like here's the deal. He's not feeling great. He's, blah 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 blah." And then we got home from the hospital that night, and he spent most of the night trying to cheer me up because he was that guy, he was making jokes about everything and being silly and goofy. And I was like, "Baby, like, this is serious. What's gonna happen?" And he was like, "Well, worst case scenario, I'm gonna need surgery." Like we literally thought that that was the worst case scenario, is that he would need surgery. And once we had our insurance, that wouldn't be as bad as, without insurance or whatever shitty insurance we were already on. So we went back to Chicago, and he spent most of that week in bed, and he just kept getting worse. It just kept getting worse. It was New Year's Eve, and I called a friend of his who was an ER doctor, and I was like, "Okay, these are his symptoms. This is what's going on. Like, I don't know, know what to do." And he was like, "Get him to a hospital immediately because these symptoms, like, they're not good. Chest pain, chills, and sweats. Like, he's like, they're not good, but they could also be any number of things. But he was like, "Get him to a hospital immediately." And Derek refused. He refused to go to the hospital. Like, and we had gone to, at some point in the week, we had gone to urgent care, and they're like, "There's nothing we can do for you. Like, you need to go to a hospital." Like, and he just wouldn't. He just wouldn't. And I remember, so this was New Year's. We didn't do anything for New Year's because he was sick. I remember waking him up just after midnight to kiss him because Happy New Year. And I was so mad at him. I was so mad at him because he wouldn't take care of himself. He wouldn't do what was necessary to be healthy. And it was my job as his wife, as his new bride, to take care of him and make sure that he was safe and healthy, and he wouldn't let me do that. So he finally got up New Year's Day, 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and he was like, "Okay, I want to go to the hospital." And so we took an Uber to the hospital, and the whole way there he kept repeating that he didn't want to die. And so we got him to the hospital, and they got him into the ER, or into the ER right away. And this was at Rush in Chicago, which is a teaching hospital. So there were all of these med students around. There was, a teacher. There, I was holding his hand, and like they were, giving him drugs for what, I don't even, like, and this is where my memory breaks down a lot because I remember big chunks of what was going on, but then there was also a lot of just waiting. There was a lot of just sitting around waiting for whatever news there was going to be. And so we were in the ER, and he was having a hard time breathing. He couldn't breathe. And so they decided to intubate him. And so I was holding his hand, and they gave him something to, like, I guess, knock him out or whatever so they could intubate. And that was the first time that he coded there in the ER. So at this point, I was kind of sitting off to the side, and there was a doctor there that who just sat with me and explained what the machines meant. So like he was like, this is his heart rate, it's a little fast, and we're gonna try to, like, we're gonna give him this to, like, help with that, and then this is his blood pressure, and this one means oxygen level and blah blah. So he just sat and explained what everything meant and what they were doing about it. And I'm so grateful for that doctor. I don't remember his name. I don't remember what he looked like. It was an acknowledgement that I was on the point of panic and I needed, it was a lifeline. It felt like a lifeline. So at some point they asked me to sign to authorize dialysis. And so this was the first time signing my married name was in the hospital to authorize dialysis. At some point they moved me to like, one of those little waiting rooms. So I was there. I know his dad was there at some point. His aunt was there at some point. His best friend was there with his girlfriend. They were there for a little bit. And I remember, like, the student doctor who was, like, I guess sort of in charge, whatever, but like she came in at her shift change to, like, update us and let us know what was going on. And they had gotten him stable, and they were going to move him up to the OR, and they were going to do a bypass, I believe, at that point. And again, this is kind of where my brain stopped retaining information. And so we were there all night at the hospital. We would get periodic updates where they would come in and tell us, what was going on. They got him stable. They got him stable. They wanted to do a bypass, so they did, a bypass. They were, they were gonna get him stable, and then they were gonna do surgery, and then after that, they were gonna assess brain damage and what had happened neurologically. So we were getting these updates. This was like, I was there all night. I remember sitting in this waiting room reading some book. It was like about a former Secret Service officer who, like, had lost a charge or whatever, like his person had died or whatever, and he was now a PI or something like that. It was like something like that. I read like half the book and I don't remember any of it. At some point, I went down to get some tea because I needed something to do, and I remember crouching in the in the hospital hallway and just sobbing for like 5 minutes before going to get my tea. It was like a yo-yo all night of, like, hope and despair, where it's like he might pull through, like it might be okay, and then they come in and give us an update and be like, and it was just hope and despair, where it's like he might be okay, and but then, oh God, it was a rough fucking night. It is what it was. It was a rough fucking night. And then, they're like, his blood isn't clotting, and he is bleeding out faster than we can transfuse blood in. I'm pretty sure they use the word sepsis. But, you hear that word and you're like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. And it got to the point where we were just waiting. We were just waiting for his mom to get there so that we could turn the machines off because there was nothing left to do. Once his mom got there, ugh, this is hard, y'all. This is why am I doing this podcast? The fuck is wrong with me? Okay, anyway, Save that clip for later. All right. So his mom got there, and then and at some point, like, I had been updating my sister and being like, okay, I can't field this right now. I'm here with my husband. I can't update people. Will you please do that? I'll tell you. And so she was updating people for me, which I'm so grateful for, because I was not in any kind of headspace to talk to anybody. At some point, I had texted one of his co he was supposed to work like the next day, and I was like, there's no way he's coming into work. So I was texting his coworker trying to get his shift covered. And I was texting like his best friend. I was texting his former roommate and also other best friend, you know. I was texting his band. I was texting everybody, just being, and it got to the point where it's like, okay, if you want to say goodbye, now is the time. Like, get here now. And actually, it was really beautiful because, like, a lot of people did show up. I don't remember who all was there. I'm glad that they could be there. I'm glad that, you know, he could be surrounded by people that he loved and who loved him in those last moments. At some point, they pulled us, me and his parents, aside to talk about organ donation. His mom was very adamant that that was something that he didn't want. And, you know, he was 33, so like he and I had never really had we hadn't talked about any of this, because why fucking would we? He was 33. You're not supposed to die of heart issues at 33. So we elected against organ donation because that was not a battle I was going to have in the moment, and I didn't know whether or not it was something that he wanted anyway. And so we finally said our goodbyes. They turned the machines off, and at 10:38 a.m. he was gone completely. You know, he was gone long before that, but that's our official time of death. And yeah, it fucking sucked. I remember leaving the hospital and being in the parking garage and just being like, well, now what? Like, what am I supposed to do now? You know, at some point, I remember at some point in the night, well, it would have been early morning, I think. I remember calling my best friend and just saying, like, he's not going to make it. I remember looking out through these windows, and it was a really foggy day. So this was January 2nd, and it was foggy, which seemed really strange to me at the time. We stopped at our apartment, my apartment, to get some things, and I couldn't be there because I just couldn't, you know, it was our home and he was gone. And so we went to his best friend's house. I remember people showing up with Taco Bell and whiskey, and I think I ate. I don't remember. At some point I fell asleep on the couch because like I had been up all night. So I remember I fell asleep on the couch, and when I woke up it was dark and I was alone and I'd lost it. I think that was the moment that it became real beyond the point of any, like, I just spent a whole night, you know, oscillating between hope and despair and hope and fear, and like, and this was, I think, the first moment that it was real, and I felt it. Like, I felt it being real. So yeah, that fucking sucked. I don't remember a lot of 2017. It was a really awful way to start the new year, and it got real bad. It got really bad. I spent a lot of that year trying to numb myself. I was pretty numb for a while, but there were these moments of complete clarity, and those moments of clarity hurt so bad. It hurt so bad. And I wanted to be feeling anything other than that, because it was, and it's really dramatic to say it this way, but I feel that when he died, I died too. I remember going to my parents' house up in Wisconsin and like going through my childhood closet and just throwing everything in bags and boxes for donation or to throw away because I was like, this person doesn't exist anymore. And I don't need to hold on to any of this because this person isn't here anymore. And, I wasn't doing that with his belongings. I was doing that with mine, which is also interesting. I'll probably talk about that at some point later. But, like, it took me over 2 years to, like, go through his things and decide what to keep and what to donate. And at that point, and I ended up doing that because I had to, not because I wanted to. So, like, sometimes the universe makes you go through the things, whether or not you want to. And so that's fun. But yeah, that first year when I wasn't numb, because there was a lot of feeling numb, and when I wasn't numb, I was intentionally self numbing. It was a lot of drugs and alcohol and sleeping with strangers and people that I really shouldn't have been sleeping with. It was a lot of self destructive decisions. I went to Vegas for Valentine's Day because Derek and I had already been planning on going to Vegas for Valentine's Day. And so I decided to go anyway. Oh, I should mention the GoFundMe. So when Derek died, a friend from college, a former roommate, set up a GoFundMe for me. And I think it raised over $10,000. And that's another thing that I'm so grateful for. Like I really did have some amazing support, and I am so appreciative of that because I don't honestly know where I would be today if I hadn't had that. I had people to stay with. I had this GoFundMe that made it so that I didn't have to worry about work for a little bit, which was great because I was pretty perennially underemployed at that point. I had left JP Morgan, and so I was doing a lot of odd jobs and side hustle type stuff. And so this GoFundMe, without that, I don't know what I would have done. I was not in a headspace to go back to work anytime soon. I was not well, bitch. I was not doing good. I'll probably cut this part out. I started cutting myself. It's the only time that in my life that I've ever struggled with self-harm. And a lot of it was just I wasn't doing well. And the number of people that were saying things like, "Oh, you're so brave, you're so strong, it's so good to see that you're doing all right," and like blah 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 blah. And I was like, I'm not doing all right. I'm not okay. And so I think the cutting for me was it was at least partially I wanted the pain on the outside to match the pain on the inside. And I think it was also probably a little bit of a cry for help where I just needed someone to know that I was not okay and this was not okay. Yeah, so that was part of my journey was this self-harm bit. I never really got suicidal exactly, but I did, I definitely had the feeling of like it would be all right if I didn't wake up. It would be all right if this was over. And I was making a lot of really self destructive decisions that probably could have ended very poorly. So I remember I went to Vegas and I hooked up with a stranger, like you do. He was the first person I was with after Derek died. I cried, but it was also the first moment that I realized that I was going to be okay. That, everything hurt and it was terrible. But I was in Las Vegas and I was having more fun than I thought that I could. I went alone, I went by myself. Well, actually, I brought Derek's ashes with me. Okay, so this is another thing. I went full on crazy. Like, I hit the crazy button. So I have Derek's ashes in a whiskey bottle because it's where he'd want to be. And I carried him around with me for months. And a lot of that was like, well, I'm carrying him around emotionally. I might as well do it physically, but also like I think there was an element of I need to see him. I need to see that this is real. I need this to understand that this is real and that he's not gonna, come walking through the door at any time. And also, like, it was weirdly comforting. It was weirdly comforting to have him there. And also it freaked people out, and I know he would love that. I remember I lived across the street from this bar, and I would go in there all the time with the Derek bottle, and I'd have him on the bar, and I'd be sitting there drinking, and people would come up, and it was always men. It was always men trying to hit on me, and they'd come up and ask, what's that? And I'd say, that's my husband, and it would either it would either be an immediate like, oh, and they'd walk away, or it would lead to a really interesting conversation. There was no in between. But the bartender at one point told me, she was like, I love listening to you talk to these guys because, like, they're so clearly just trying to get some. And I was just like, what? This is my husband. You want to talk to me, you got to deal with this, Which I know he would have loved. He would have fucking loved it. And so, like, yeah, I hit full send on the crazy, but also it was a weird way of honoring my husband because it's, what he honestly would have wanted. He's still in whiskey bottle. We have a mantle in our house. So he's up on the mantle, and I'll leave him a shot of whiskey every now and then because, it gets thirsty over there. But so yeah, that first year was rough. I don't remember a whole lot of it. I know I was making really terrible decisions. Like, it was just a rough year. I had to move out of our apartment because I couldn't afford to live there by myself. And then I was living on a friend's futon. So I was sleeping on a futon. I was still pretty perennially underemployed. I was drinking a lot. I was doing drugs that I wouldn't normally do. I was sleeping with people that I really shouldn't have been sleeping with. And a little over a year after he died is kind of when I hit what I would call my rock bottom, where I kind of realized how hurtful those choices I was making were. I was in such a space where I was just looking for anything to make me feel better that I didn't really care what the repercussions were. I was kind of in a space of like, nothing means anything. The world doesn't make sense. That means my actions don't mean anything, and nothing, like, everything is stupid and fucked up, and it doesn't matter what I do. And unfortunately, those kinds of decisions have repercussions, they have consequences. And so year 2 was basically me dealing with those consequences of the fucked up shit I did in year 1. I stopped cutting. The last time I cut myself was my 31st birthday. And it had actually been a pretty decent day. Like, I had had an okay day, and I got home and everything hurt on the inside, and I cut myself, and it was the last time. I do have scars from that. They're not bad, they're not obvious, but they're there. I spent our anniversary in the Bahamas. I went back to the island that we went to for our honeymoon. I spread a little bit of his ashes down there. I don't remember a lot of that because I was high the whole time, because of course I was. And they actually put me in the same room, which, like, that was not intentional. That just kind of happened. I remember walking down the hall and being like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, really? And I was like, yeah, that was it. Back to that same room where we had our honeymoon. And it has been a long journey out of there, out of that dark space. And it's weird to say, but I'm actually grateful because it showed me a lot of who I am. It showed me a lot of the trauma from earlier in my life that I had not addressed or worked on or worked through. It showed me how I had been living my life and how I had not been living it for me. It was a very transformative experience. It was fucking shitty. I would not recommend it to anybody. Like, if you're looking for transformation, I'm going to tell you there are ways to do it that are maybe not as effective, but not as fucking awful. And I will say, like, who I am now, like, I'm so grateful for who I am now and everything that has brought me here, and I'm grateful for the life I have now, and I know that I wouldn't be here or have this or be who I am without Derek, without having loved and lost Derek, but it fucking sucks, man. And I miss him. I love him. I'm always gonna love him and miss him. It's different now. Okay, so let me get to the good part of the story. The part, where we're here today, because it was fucking awful and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it was also super transformative, and I am such a better person now than I was then, and I know it. And I do think that it took me going through this to get here to where I am today. I don't know if I could have gotten to where I'm at today with Derek. I'll never know, and that's, not the point. But, so about a year after he passed, I hit what I would call my rock bottom, and I realized that something needed to change because I was in a really dark place. I hated myself. I hated the choices I had made. I was a person that I did not want to be, and I needed to do something about that. So I found a therapist. And actually, so when I was dealing with my like panic attacks at work, part of the short-term disability required me to get a therapist to like, sign off on the things. And so I had found this therapist, and I had, 6 sessions or whatever, and we had, talked through things. And then so cut to 2018. This would have been 2018 at this point, and a coworker had told me about this website called Open Path, which I believe it now has a different name, but it was called Open Path at the time. And it basically, you pay a fee up front, and then they connect you with therapists that work on a sliding scale. And so I was looking through these therapists, and the therapist that I had seen when I was on my short term disability was on there. And I was like, you know what? I remember that guy. I like that guy. I'm going to go to that guy. And like, I'm also so grateful for that. Like, it's funny, these little synchronicities that you don't consider synchronicities until much later. But if he hadn't been on there, I don't know that I would have chosen the therapist. I might have been like, I don't, it's overwhelming, I can't. But since there was someone on there who I'd already seen and already talked to and already developed a rapport with, that was huge. And he's still my therapist today. So here we are, 7 years later. Yeah, 7 years later, I realized this a couple years ago. I was like, this is the longest relationship I've ever had, and like, do I send him a flowers or something? I don't know. But so I started going to therapy. That was huge. I started taking more agency, accepting agency in my life. That meant accepting consequences. That meant dealing with repercussions. And it was fucking awful, but it's been worth it. It's been so worth it. And it has been a long slog. It's been a journey. About 2 years after he died was the first time I got into like what I would call like a relationship. I had more casual connections for a while, which I was, grateful for, and they were great experiences. I wasn't in a place to like really love again, in a like capital L way. And so it took me about 2 years to get to that point where I felt like I could actually love again. And then it took me until the 5 year mark to take off my wedding ring. I wore my wedding ring up until it was past 5 years. I wore mine and I wore his. And I kind of realized that I did want partnership, and I did want that kind of relationship again. I did want a partner. I did want possibly a husband or a wife or, someone in my life to share my life with. And I realized I couldn't do that without letting go of the marriage that I already had and already was in. And so it took me until 5 years to take off my wedding ring. And then I met my husband now. So he owned a bar a couple doors down from my apartment. So at some point, okay, so like I moved home to Iowa to help take care of my grandmother, and then we decided to move her into a nursing home. She's still alive. She's still kicking. She just turned 100. She's gonna outlive us all. But so I had moved home, and after we put her in nursing home, I was just kind of living in Iowa, and I had this apartment, and he owned the bar 2 doors down, and I remember walking in and chatting about, I had just moved in, and I had all these books, and I was like, and so it wasn't the first time we met, but it was pretty early on. It was like maybe the second or third time I had been into the bar, and it was the anniversary of Derek's death. And I asked Luke, the bartender, now my husband, if he would do a shot with me in honor of my dead husband. And he was like, absolutely. And then he asked if he could give me a hug, and he gave me a hug. And I didn't really think anything of it because he was in a relationship at the time, and I was, trying to figure my way out of Iowa. But how I knew that he was special, that this connection was special, was so we started dating at the beginning of October. My wedding anniversary with Derek is October 14th. And I was going to go, I travel every year for our anniversary, partially because it feels like a good way to honor us and our relationship, and also because I don't often want to be around people that I actually know when I'm dealing with this, because it's personal and it's private, and I don't want it's nice to get a break from being a widow for a little bit, especially when it's your anniversary, where it's like I didn't want it. For a while, I was charging people for what I called the sad widow face, or it's like, don't look at me like that, like, are you going to owe me a shot. It's, anyway. But how I knew that Luke was special was I invited him to go with me on my anniversary trip, and he couldn't, which was probably good. It was probably, I think I needed one more of just me and Derek. But it was the first time that I had wanted to let somebody in to that experience. It was the first time that I wanted to share that with somebody, and that's how I knew that he was special, and this was different. And I still carry Derek with me. I will always carry Derek with me. I have a little bottle of his ashes that's actually sitting right here on the desk next to me as I talk about all this. And I feel that this podcast is kind of our creative love child. I wouldn't be here without him. I know that I wouldn't be who I am today without him and our marriage. And as fucking shitty as it was to lose him, it was so much more beautiful to have known him and to have gotten that time together. And, my personal belief system, I believe in what are called soul contracts. I believe that we choose the life that we live before we get here. I believe that our souls choose the challenges that we go through. And I do believe that this marriage was in our soul contract, and I do believe that it was always meant to be short. Sometimes I wish that that hadn't been the case. I wish we could have gotten more time together, but I also feel like on some level we knew that we didn't have much time together, and so we lived it fully and completely. We did everything that we could together. We lived it big, and we loved big. And I think on some level that's because we knew that we didn't have much time together, and so we made the best of it. And I am so grateful that we got that time together. From the day we met to the day he died was exactly 16 months. And those are 16 months that I will cherish forever. And I do think that this was something that I was meant to go through and experience. And honestly, this podcast is something that I feel called to do, which I was just talking about this in therapy, that sounds so like, I don't know, I was called to do it. It feels pretentious to say it that way, but I don't know, that's what it feels like. I feel like I didn't grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to have a podcast someday, like this is something that I feel is important and it's something that I feel called to. And do I feel like I'm the best person to do it? I don't know. I don't know that I am. But I'm the person that apparently got cosmically tapped with it, so here we are. And again, that's my personal belief system is I believe that this is another part of my soul contract that I'm here to do and fulfill. And we'll see how it goes. Yeah, so that's my story. I'm remarried. We just hit 1 year married, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for where I'm at, and I'm so grateful to be able to share this podcast with you. I have no idea where it's going to go. I have no idea what's going to happen out of this. All I know is these stories are important. And I think it's also important for me, it's been 8 years at this point, and I think it's important for people just starting their grief journey to know that it does get better. It does get, I can't, okay, it doesn't get better. You learn how to handle it. You learn how to carry it. I still have days that hurt, I still have days where I'm sobbing in the grocery store. They don't happen all that often anymore. It's pretty rare. I made it through this recording, but the first time I tried to record this, I couldn't make it through. I couldn't make it through the story. I couldn't make it through what happened. And that's how it goes. There will always be days where I feel it more acutely, and there will always be days where I'm fine. And that's okay. And all of it's okay. And so I guess if you've just lost a spouse, if you're at the beginning of this, know that it does get easier to handle and to bear. And there are good things on the other side. There are beautiful things on the other side. There is love somewhere out there on the other side. And it's not going to look the same and it's not going to feel the same. And that's okay because it's not the same and you're not the same. I guess that's all I have. That's my story. Thank you for listening. And, take care of yourself. Take care of you.